um, there's a lot of ways in which birds and energy are natural partners, and you can kind of see them hinted at here to begin with. But we'll go into these and many other ways that birds and energy make for a very interesting topic, but also maybe a really important topic these days. And like I said, this is supported by the Boulder County Audubon Society, and my organization now, which I just started, is called Geo Sapiens, the Earthwise Human. And in it, I integrate environmental education, energy education, and job readiness, especially for young people. So imagine being down in the bowels of the earth, this about 100 or more years ago, or of course, even today. Look at the difference in our technology there. And coal has been a huge part of our economy for 200 plus years. And yet we all know it has impacts on the world when we dig it out and burn it. And since 1865, the United States alone, we have produced 12.6 billion tons of coal. That's an area that for each person these days, every day we consume about a living room full of coal, 20 feet by 15 by 7.5 feet. And burning this coal actually contributes to the atmosphere a lot more in terms of weight of um, carbon dioxide because it's combining with oxygen. It's over 3 times the total carbon dioxide in the atmosphere today is how much we burned. Now, of course, carbon dioxide is continually being taken out of the atmosphere as well. So we don't have 3 times the carbon dioxide now as we did in 1865, but the level has gone up 46% since 1865. And we're now at 415 parts per million. Well, that's been the biggest contributing factor to change in the physiology of our planet. I'll refer to this kind of phrase a lot today, physiology of our planet. And one symptom of this is climate change. And we're changing the nature of our planet's atmosphere that is in effect the cell membrane of our living planet. Both the cell membrane and the atmosphere regulate what goes in and out and what doesn't. And so just wanted you to see some interesting comparisons between things at the micro and macro level to see that Earth indeed is a physiology just like our own. So the marshes and intestinal linings both have huge amounts of surface area for the exchange of gases and nutrients. And a bog and a liver look curiously similar, and they're both filtration systems. And then the great river deltas look somewhat like our capillaries, and that's where things are both dropped off and picked up again in a physiology. And so Earth is a living system. That's what our Earth system science tells us now. It's powered by the energy of the sun. And we need to shine a light on how to understand human energy systems within the context of this living system, I believe, if we're to best understand it. And luckily for us, one of the best ways to do that is by shining light on birds. And of course, birds serve as a canary in the coal mine. But there are also many, many tie-ins that we'll explore today. By the way, canaries were used in coal mines to detect carbon dioxide and methane starting in 1896 and were used as late as 1986. So these birds served as a harbinger, a warning system, but now birds really are serving as a very visible warning system of changes in our whole living system. And that includes methane, but also carbon dioxide. So that's why we're putting together this program that's part of Birds and Beyond, which is a two-part series that I'm doing with Boulder County Audubon Society. And you can see them here. And so tonight we're on birds and energy. And I also do a program called Birds as a Window to the World. So the main points are that energy is the most important cross-cutting issue of our day. I'll kind of bolster that in a second. that human energy systems and choices impact birds in significant ways. And of course, they're a proxy for the whole living system too. But there's also a whole lot to learn about energy from birds, and I hope you'll enjoy both aspects of this program. So first on the cross-cutting, I'm not going to take too much time to justify this. We're going to have to kind of get to some point where we realize that energy is just absolutely central to all of these things and the entire economy essentially and Earth's living systems. So essentially, energy plays a huge role in all the things we care about, everything in our lives. So if that's the case, then energy is worth talking about. As far as energy's impact on birds, I'm going to let the National Audubon Society kind of represent this. They say on their website there's no path to stabilizing the climate without addressing biodiversity loss and dramatically changing how we produce electricity. And Audubon believes that renewable energy and natural climate, oh boy, my little box here is covering up the script, so I don't know if it is for you too. Climate solutions and have important roles to play in mitigating the impact of climate change. And they say it's the single greatest threat to birds and other species. So it's impacting life, it's impacting birds. But what can we learn from birds? Well, I'm just going to start off with 3 quick slides here to point out one very important thing, and that is that birds have the highest body temperature of all animals. They're much warmer than we are. In fact, almost all birds are warmer than almost all mammals. And so think of this little hummingbird and all the activity it does at a body temperature of 105. And then I don't know if you've heard of a red-billed calia, but it happens to be the most numerous bird on Earth. It's in Africa. I should say the most numerous except for the domestic chicken. There's far more domestic chickens than any other species of bird on Earth. Now look at this, 106 degrees, but they have been measured with a body temperature of as high as 120 degrees without negative consequences. And then on the other side of the scale, we have the emperor penguin that has a body temperature of over 100, and this in Antarctica. And we're going to look at the penguin a little bit more later, but just to show you right off the bat, this idea of energy, heat, body temperature are central to the lives of all birds on Earth. One little teaser for the penguin later is that I found this video. It's made about 10 years ago, but it was talking about penguins and renewable energy. And there's some pretty interesting analogies that the author makes here, and I'll refer to them later. So I'm just starting off by setting the stage with these 3 ideas that energy is important, that our energy systems affect birds, and that birds are a great teacher. So here's where I'll back up a little bit and tell you a little bit of my history in teaching energy and in the context of living systems. Energy and Life is the title of many programs, both formal and informal, that I've done for decades now. And it started here. I was the head naturalist for the Northern Virginia Regional Park Authority, and this 1912 farmhouse was our nature center. And in the early 90s, we started making energy our biggest focus, next to the usual traditional things of local natural history, some human history, ecology. Energy became our biggest focus. And we retrofitted this in other buildings. We put in solar. We talked a lot about energy efficiency, et cetera. And one of the tools we used early on was this energy bike that allows kids to really feel energy, how much it takes to run different things. And then in the late 1990s, our park system, through our foundation, put together this project, Energy, the Human Environment Connection. This is a scene in our park's concert venue. And we eventually got enough money to produce this energarium that Matthew was talking about a while ago. So you see here in the foreground a somewhat traditional diorama display in a nature center, but in there is this sign, the energarium. And all over the Nature Center were all sorts of both traditional environmental education messages, plus things like waves, the physical nature of waves, efficiency in light bulbs, how energy travels through the cycles of life. That's the demo on the upper left, et cetera, et cetera. So energy was really important. Now, of course, even in a traditional nature center, you'd often hear about plants and therefore photosynthesis, where the sun's energy is combining carbon dioxide and water to produce glucose. And this is a fine place to revisit our birds for it's really important to understand the living aspect of energy in all this. So here's one of our energy bike displays. I just did this down at Denver Audubon's property last or 2 weekends ago. And there sitting on the table is, well, it's a little bottle of maple syrup. And I wait for someone to ask, what is that doing sitting there on this display? And I said, oh, well, that's where it all starts. And we talk about photosynthesis. And then, of course, people can identify very quickly because there's a nearby hummingbird feeder. And that glucose that is then converted into sucrose and fructose in the body of the plant is the main or one of the main foods for hummingbirds, as we all know. But it's the basis for all life, whether it's other foods that derive from it or the sugar itself. And then cedar waxwings are one of my favorite birds. And of course, here's their range map in macro scale. But if you just look at the range map in Washington state alone, you see it's very complicated. And you all can probably already guess that that's because they're these berry hungry birds. And so they're going wherever the berries are with the seasons and the different species, etc. So they're after that sugar as well, after it, ripens and cooks in the sun and becomes maximally nutritive. And that allows us to kind of step back a little bit and even consider the evolution of warm-blooded animals, birds especially, since they're the hottest. But there's a great co-evolution. We often talk about that with insects and plants, but really it's been as much with warm-blooded animals and plants because these high energy parts of seeds and fruit are really what sustains warm-blooded mammalian life. And that definitely includes us with all these grains that supported our civilizations. Another great way to look at energy in birds is through migration, and some of you are probably familiar, even though it's mostly on the East Coast and north of us, the migration of blackpolls. When they come up from northern South America in the spring, they go across the Caribbean, but try to hit as much land as possible, and then go up the continent into the northern Canada and even up to Alaska. But in the fall, you notice those yellow arrows, they're coming back all the way over to Nova Scotia, where there just happens to be the perfect time for the ripening of berries and seeds and fruits, and also insect life. And they double their weight. And then migrate 1,800 miles nonstop, 3 days over open ocean down to Venezuela and Colombia, etc. And they arrive at the original weight before they doubled their weight. It's stupendous, but it's a study in energy the whole way through. One of my favorites on this account is the Swainson's hawk, and you can see the range map there. They're going to be heading down to Argentina again soon after having just arrived, it seems. And when they're up in the breeding grounds, they will eat a variety of foods, including mammals and birds and reptiles to help feed their young. But on their migration, and then especially when they arrive in Argentina, their main food source is grasshoppers. And so they don't have to stock up quite as much as those blackpoll warblers because they're going to find food all the way down. And then, of course, another aspect of their migration is that they're going to be riding the thermal as much as they can. And that's why their migration is entirely over land, not over sea, because the thermals just don't happen over the ocean. And so I've circled Panama here. Maybe some of you have seen a picture like this where most of these are Swainson's hawks going over Panama. And so we realized that, hey, being over land is really important for this species because they're using the thermals.
Can I ask what time of year is that happens in Panama?
Well, let's see. They've left here in Colorado by early October, so I'm just taking a rough guess. I would say late October, early November, something like that.
Okay. My daughter's going to be there next week, but that's too
Oh,
soon.
wow. Yeah. Yeah, I
Thank,
don't think it'll happen that soon.
thank you.
There's the swings and talk overhead. So, yeah, there's just all these connections that, are inherent in the bodies and behavior and other aspects of bird life that really is fascinating. Some of you may already be into this whole area of migration and what goes into it, but if not, start to check it out and see what is involved. What are their food sources and how do they do it, et cetera, because it's in and of itself a fascinating area. Well, then, whether they're in migration or at other times, we can start to intersect with energy in other ways through looking at mortality sources, which of course has been in the news a lot, especially through wind turbines. And these are estimates here, of course, and in fact, that's about all there are. Everywhere you look, the numbers vary widely, but the trend is almost always the same. So, for instance, cats and building collisions are not only the highest, but by far as particular sources. But then at the bottom here, habitat loss and climate change would dwarf those, and they may continue to dwarf those. Um, so
I'm sorry.
cats,
Can I ask a question
oh,
about that chart? I'm sorry to interrupt.
sure,
Is this per year?
yes, per year.
Okay, thank you.
Seems almost impossible with those numbers, but when you think of
It's
the hundreds of species
heart
and then,
stopping.
yeah, populations. Actually, the most numerous bird, as I understand it, in the United States or in North America, is the red-winged blackbird, and there's 250 to 300 million of those. So we start extrapolating out. There obviously are billions and billions of birds, but still these numbers are huge. But it's that last number, that last category that we really do need to be most concerned about. So cats do their damage. Luckily, of course, cats are more going to be eating our city and feeder birds rather than birds that are in more wilder areas, just because they're not going to intersect with those lives. Buildings claim an awful lot just by birds running into the windows. Here's one attempt to try to make it more obvious to birds that they're not supposed to go there. And of course, you all know about the bird of prey silhouettes, etc. And then there's the wind turbines, which have received a lot of notoriety. And, we should definitely be concerned about this. There's up to 500,000 birds killed every year in the United States by wind turbines. But when you compare it to those other numbers, you realize it's fairly small number. But here in my actual hometown of Louisville, Colorado, there's a company called Identiflight, and they're now on 5 continents, and they've shown that their technology, which is a series of cameras that not only detects birds but identifies them, and then if there's something like a golden eagle near a wind turbine, they'll shut the turbine down for 30 seconds. And they have shown drastically reduced mortality where these cameras are put in. So we're working on it. We should work on it, and there's probably other methods and technologies out there. And then we look at a picture of Earth from space at night, which of course is a good proxy for where all the energy is being used too. And we often hear of the night dark sky initiatives, which are tremendously important for allowing birds to migrate through areas without stressing and being impeded. And so you've probably come across efforts like this, and if not, maybe look into them for towns and cities near you, dark sky initiatives. But then, of course, habitat loss. And this is the big one now, and it's probably being followed up quickly by climate change, which also contributes to habitat loss. And this is obvious just from the downward trend of many, many birds. As we lose these kinds of habitats, forest habitat, shore, grasslands, And just as exemplified by these birds on the screen, we know that habitat loss is a big part, a huge part of the large decline of birds since, say, 1970 and before. So it is an important question to ask what we do about habitat destruction because it's all tied up in our society's thirst for energy. If we didn't need to acquire so much energy, and also if we didn't have so much energy at our disposal to do things, we wouldn't have nearly as much habitat destruction. But climate change, so we need to face this, right? This report says that we're likely to get to this 1.5 degrees Celsius limit in the next 5 years. And even before this kind of prediction of it being coming up soon was made, the predictions of what the consequences would be were dire, exposing nearly a billion people to water stress and desertification, costing an estimated 63 billion in adaptation and damages in major agriculture. And I'd have to say at this point that's a way underestimate. Put 14% of the world's species at risk of extinction, not just threatened or endangered. And, for instance, expand the distribution of malaria. And we're seeing all these things happen, at least going towards these numbers already. So, folks, what are we going to do about climate change? And I'm going to put another of these black screens on just for a sec, kind of have that weigh on our minds just a bit, and realize that we as nature lovers, if we would call ourselves that, bird lovers, we as people who see trends in the world and the living system have a unique responsibility and also a unique ability to get across to the rest of the world about the energy predicament that we're in. And again, that's why this Birds and Energy series. Because what are we going to do about energy or about climate change? Energy is the major factor that's going to determine our fate. There really is nothing else that comes close. And energy is also the major enabling factor for allowing habitat destruction. So I'll back up again and say, for instance, when I do a program in a local middle or high school, we talk about energy basic. Like here's an energy generator where when you move the shaft, out of those wires comes electricity, and that this is the basis for electrical generation in almost all cases. And it's easy to visualize with a hydroelectric dam turning a turbine on a generator. And so most of our energy technologies are turning a turbine and putting out electricity. And of course, the exception to that is solar panels that sit there and without any moving parts. By the way, I don't know if you've thought about it before, but I had said this is an electric generator, but it's also an electric motor because if instead of putting in motion, you put in electricity, well, then out comes the motion. So if you have a fan that's running on a motor that is the mirror image of a generator. So to generate the electricity, gas and coal are still the biggest ones in our country. Although when I started this in Lafayette 11, 12 years ago, the order of these two is switched. And then comes nuclear. It's always held steady at about 19 or 20% in the United States. And wind has gained greatly in the last couple decades, and actually in the last decade in particular. I'm going to show you another graph about that. And of course, in California, especially, you have a lot of hydroelectricity and solar. So this is the production here in Colorado, and I just wanted to point out that wind is 28% of our production now, which is along with the 6% solar, over a third is generated by renewables now. Out in California, this thing is covering up the screen again, but natural gas is the big one. But coal is almost not to be found, and solar and hydro are very large in California. Now, all of these, I have to take this into account on Zoom sessions. All of these on the right, you see we've covered the natural gas and below, and I'll circle that here. And that's the electrical generation in large part, and the petroleum is for transportation. But I want to return to heat because, of course, natural gas is used for heating as much or more than it's used for electrical generation. So to consider heat, I thought I'd share with you a little video from a little pond near my house during the winter. This was when it was about 10 below zero, and there was a little bubbler in this pond, which made it the great place for all sorts of ducks and mergansers and so forth. And so let's just enjoy this for a few seconds. But consider that they're having a lot of fun in 11-degree temperatures, 11 in the day and 10 degrees below zero at night. Golden eye. So how do they do this? And in fact, when they're up on the edge on the ice, it's even more stupendous how they do this. Well, again, it starts with photosynthesis. And what I didn't include in the last illustration was that at every energy transformation, heat is a byproduct. So our metabolism, the byproduct is heat, and we've ramped it up in warm-blooded animals. Now, this is a universal thing. This is out of an ecology textbook, and it shows the sun running all these cycles, but heat is relieved. And here's an illustration that shows energy running the economy, the human economy, as a bubbled subset, if you will, of all ecological cycles. And in that illustration, too, heat was featured as coming off all the time. Heat, heat, heat. It's just so tremendously important to our ability to understand energy. So how do birds retain their heat, especially if they're in a cold environment? So the seagull or this gull on ice, its body temperature is actually 102 to 109, depending on the species and the time of the year, but its feet might be freezing. And that's because they intentionally share the heat with the returning venous blood from the hot arterial blood that it's going out. It's called a counter-current heat exchanger. And so there's very little heat to be lost from those feet. And most of the heat has been carried back into the body. And as it turns out, this is a major part of building technology these days. We want a heat recovery unit, and it's even called a counter-current heat exchanger, in our ventilation systems and our heating systems so that we don't let the heat out of the building after we've spent all that precious energy heating it up.
Excuse me, are you showing
Yes.
slides?
What's that?
Are you showing slides?
Oh, I am. Can you see them?
No, I can't.
Oh,
Can anyone else?
They're visible. I'm seeing it.
huh.
Huh. Okay, I'm not seeing your slides.
That's very curious given that you're on the Zoom session.
Yep.
I would check your view, go to maybe side by side speaker, and then you'll see it.
Okay. See if you can view that. I'm sorry that you're having that issue there.
This will be recorded, so if you continue to have troubles, you'll be able to see it afterward.
Oh, there you go. Great. So here we return to the penguins and heat. And, if you look online and type in penguins and energy, let alone sometimes other species, you'll find quite a bit. Because in this case, for instance, penguin feathers have been studied to figure out how to make better and better insulation. And this British show, Energize Anything, featured penguins when they started talking about insulation. And here's that video I mentioned earlier. Well, the gentleman went down to Antarctica and he was studying penguins, but he was also an energy expert. And he says that both penguins and human beings have high energy lifestyles. And penguins from eating fish and krill, and us from burning fossil fuels. And when you think about all we've talked about here today, he made the case that we use that energy primarily for transportation and heat. And actually, if you think about it, that's the very large proportion of human energy use, especially when you consider that a lot of that heat is used for manufacturing as well. And he said that unfortunately, our high energy lifestyle is causing problems for penguins. And so it's our responsibility to go to 100% renewable so that we can save both penguins and perhaps ourselves. And I think his analysis is spot on. And I raise it here to kind of make the point that the theme of this presentation tonight isn't kind of just another topic. It's almost a whole ball of wax, at least the energy side of things. And when you consider that we need to learn about life, then birds are a big part of that as well. And I'm starting to close up here, but I thought I'd share a few adaptations that really most adaptations are energy acquisition and conservation adaptations. So here's some gobblers in that same pond. I don't know if you've seen this behavior. They go round and round and round. They're stirring up the water there so that they can filter feed the plankton in there. And that's how they're eating constantly when it's this cold. And I don't know if you've ever seen the adaptation that allows them to do it, but isn't that special? Looks like the baleen on a whale. And it's what they're constantly shaking their bills back and forth to filter out all those microorganisms. Then on a woodpecker, say with these two species here, if they had to drill out a hole that was big enough so that their beak could reach all the way in and like force it out, tweezer out the insect grub, they would spend more energy drilling the hole than they ever get from the insect. So you may know that the woodpecker's tongue starts on its forehead and goes up over the top of its skull and extends out, that they can stick their tongue out 2 times longer than their head. And then at the end of that tongue is this remarkable sticky harpoon that allows them to nab that insect grub. And this is an energy adaptation all the way. It's allowing it to bring in more energy than it spends. And then, of course, we know of the birds flying in V formation to cut down on drag of the wind. And another very interesting adaptation that birds seem to be going through as we observe is that the measurements that bird banders do are showing that birds' wings are getting longer relative to their body, and their body size is decreasing. And both of these are ways to allow your body to give off heat. And if they're in a cold environment, they can fold their wings up against their body and they're almost as well protected against the cold as before. But when they're flying and when they're in hot situations, these other adaptations come into play. And then, of course, you've probably heard a fair amount about changing migration patterns. They're arriving earlier, arriving to areas further north, et cetera, et cetera. And that's another symptom of the changing climate. One last one here. I don't know if you've ever observed this. It's hilarious. When a hummingbird is on a cold night, you might come out in the morning and find it. In this case, they were lucky to find it on a hummingbird feeder. It looks like it's dead, but it's in torpor, where they go down to as much as 54 degrees and therefore conserve their body's energy by not having to produce all that heat. And then hopefully the sun shines on them in the morning, they warm back up and fly away. Well, to me, this is a very important concept. And Amory Lovin's the energy guru for the whole world, really. He started the Rocky Mountain Institute, calls it a negawatt. And he says it's a unit of energy that's saved through conservation or efficiency rather than generated. And he and others are now trying to advocate for, or were trying to advocate, he was, and there's still advocacy for, a megawatt market that would create saved electricity as a commodity just like any other. And wouldn't that be great if we could commodify the savings rather than the expenditures of energy? Okay, well, we're on the home stretch here, and we can kind of celebrate birds by saying that they're amazing at all these things that we love to watch, singing and flight and migration and all the different ways they live. And we're amazing too. The thing that really sets us apart is our reason, our abstraction, our ability to plan like no other creature on Earth. I mean, we can look ahead into the future, see what's coming down the pike, plan for it. And in the past, that served us very well. And we're going to have to use that now because it's also perhaps the double-edged sword. In other words, if we plan all the things that cause climate change, but don't plan and accomplish the things that will reverse it, then we and life are going to be in trouble. It reminds me of this cartoon. I remember picking up the Washington Post in 1985, and the caption of the Gary Larson cartoon read, "The picture is bleak, gentlemen. The world's climates are changing, the mammals are taking over, and we have a brain the size of a walnut." Well, I don't think we have a brain the size of a walnut, but it may be that we're limiting our ways of thinking. We're not looking at the things we need to address. We're not considering the possible solutions as well we might. And that's, again, hope of this presentation is to get us thinking in new ways. This is not a new thought, however. Many of you probably know the flag of New Mexico. It's actually a 1,000-year-old story and symbol called the Via Pueblo Indian sun symbol. And the circle is called the circle of life and love. It has no beginning and no end. And then there's 4 sets of 4 spokes, the 4 times of the year, the 4 times of the day, the 4 directions, and then the 4 times of human life, all tied up in the circle of life and powered by the energy of the sun. And these and other ancestors all around the world realized that our cycle of life was powered by the sun, and that was a basic fact to learn, a basic knowledge of a society. So we are living on a living planet, and so I want to challenge us to look at habitat destruction in a different way. Mountaintop removal, coal extraction in West Virginia, for instance, is an awful habitat destruction and affects many birds. One in particular is the cerulean warbler. But this is also it's changing our Earth's physiology so that the mining and the use of energy is the primary contributor to the changed physiology of our planet. And so we need to foresee this and plan for it and come up with new ways of doing things. So in that energarium that I told you about, there was displays all over the place, and one of them featured, it said, "How we understand and address the issue of energy will probably be humanity's biggest challenge in the coming decades." And another one said, "It's a challenge that demands all of our attention. Working together, we can change the world." And I think birds might be poised to really tell us about and encourage us towards renewable energy, energy conservation, and these important principles that we've talked about today. And so sometime soon, tomorrow perhaps, I'm going to send over to Matthew a number of resources that I hope you can look at and share. One of them is this set of one-pagers. They're PDFs of energy and birds that include many of the different areas we've covered tonight. Links for various other energy education materials. And then I would love for you all to help me connect with Audubon chapters. That's the next one. But you all yourself in your area can connect with schools, environmental education organizations, and energy organizations. And we're starting to facilitate that in Colorado. And then there's actually a variety of nonprofits and other organizations out there that can help you, your organizations you belong to, accomplish energy conservation, renewable energy, etc. So this last slide I know is a lot, but I'll send it to you in a form that you can look at and digest at your own pace. All right, well, I think that birds might be our early warning system again, only this time rather than at a coal mine scale, they're at a massive scale. And they can also be our teachers and our inspiration and a symbol of our relationship to life. And so I hope you'll help us connect with other Audubon societies or other organizations. I'm happy to do this for anyone. And I'm grateful again to Boulder County Audubon Society for enabling this. And here again is my organization. And if you wanted to, you could QR code that right there and find, actually this links to my one page web page, but you can go from there to my website quite easily.